Hello and welcome to our webinar, Winter Arts and Crafts. I'm Susan Maguire, Senior Editor for Collection Management and Library Outreach at Booklist. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some technical details. Links to today's slide presentation and title list were included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download them, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the links located there. You can also download the slides and title list by copying the URLs on this screen into your web browser. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We'll do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we'll pass along all other questions to today's panelists so they can follow up with you after the webinar. Last but not least, Booklist offers closed captioning on all webinars. To enable or disable captions on your screen, please look for and click the live transcript icon on the toolbar mentioned above. From there, you can select Show or Hide Subtitles from the menu that appears. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of the captions at any time by selecting Subtitle Settings. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Brian Ritter, Marketing Manager at Timber Press, Christopher Johns, Sales and Marketing Director at Tuttle Publishing, Ann Woodcock, Marketing and Publicity Director at Search Press, and Nanette Donohue, Collections and Technical Services Manager at the Champaign Public Library in Champaign, Illinois. First up, we'll hear from Brian Ritter. Brian is the Key Account Marketing Manager at Timber Press, where he's worked for more than a decade. As a kid, Brian spent many hours at his local library discovering himself through the new worlds and ideas he found in books. He's grateful that such places existed for him then and now, and we'd like to give a shout out to his current local library, the Central Branch of the Multnomah County Public Library in Portland, Oregon. Thank you so much for being here, Brian.
Well, thank you for having me, and hello, everyone. And as Susan said, I'm speaking to you from Portland, Oregon, and we hope to see many of you this March for the PLA conference. And we'll be, let's see, we're going to be in booth number 1956, if you'd like to drop by and say hello. So I have a number of great books to share with you, so let me go ahead and just jump right in. Next slide, please. There's a quick note about a recent release. Excuse me. New York Times bestselling author Marta McDowell has revealed the way that plants have stirred some of our most cherished authors, including Beatrix Potter, Emily Dickinson, and Laura Ingalls Wilder. In her latest book, she shares a moving account of how gardening inspired Frances Hodgson Burnett, the author of the beloved children's classic, The Secret Garden. Published in 1911, The Secret Garden is one of the most beloved children's books, selling millions of copies worldwide. Unsurprisingly, its author was a lover of flowers and gardens, but what readers may not know is that Burnett was one of the most popular and prolific writers of her time, and her literary triumph was beset with personal tragedy and frequent illness. In Unearthing the Secret Garden, author McDowell chronicles Burnett's childhood and early life, focusing on her growing interest in gardens and her development as a writer. She shares details of the 3 gardens Burnett created in Kent, Long Island, and Bermuda, as well as including a guide to the plants featured in The Secret Garden for those who want to recreate some of the garden magic at home. Unearthing the Secret Garden draws us into a richly textured account of the fascinating professional and gardening life that gave us one of literature's greatest treasures. It is a $25.95 hardcover, and that published in September. Excuse me, I need a little drink of tea. Gardening can be a form of climate activism, says organic gardener, photographer, and designer Emily Murphy. As the creator of the Grow What You Love podcast and celebrated blog Pass the Pistol, she has dedicated the last 15 years to garden education. And in her upcoming book, Grow Now, she shares easy-to-follow principles for regenerative gardening that foster biodiversity and improve soil health. She also shows how every yard mirrors the greater ecosystem. This is more than just a gardening book. It's a call to arms, urging gardeners to tackle climate change in their own backyards. DIY projects, easy to implement plans, advice for improving the overall health of a garden, and tips on choosing plants that help a garden become a functioning part of the planet's larger ecological cycles. For instance, no-dig growing, composting and mulching smartly, and planting a variety of edible perennials that attract bees and butterflies are all common sense techniques everyone can use to grow positive change. Readers will also find detailed advice on choosing plants that cycle more carbon back into the soil, selecting a broader variety of vegetables and fruits to improve soil fertility, rethinking space devoted to lawns, and adding companion plants for pollinators. Exquisitely photographed and filled with helpful lists and sidebars, Grow Now is an actionable, hopeful, and joyful roadmap for growing our way to individual climate contributions. And it is a $27.95 paperback that publishes in January 2022. Excuse me. In Plant, Grow, Harvest, Repeat, readers will discover how to get more out of their growing space with succession planting and provide a steady supply of fresh food from early spring through late fall. Drawing inspiration from natural landscapes, author Meg McAndrews Cowden teaches readers how to implement lessons from these dynamic systems in their home gardens. Readers learn how to layer succession across perennial and annual crops, maximize the early growing season, determine the sequence to plant and replant in summer, and incorporate annual and perennial flowers to benefit wildlife and ensure efficient pollination. Readers will also find seasonal sowing charts to inform garden planning, allowing them to grow anywhere, regardless of the climate. This approach to gardening has not previously been explored in such depth and detail, and with specific plant suggestions and actionable design advice, it teaches gardeners how to use nature's rhythms to increase their harvest across the seasons. And please note, Plant, Grow, Harvest is for more experienced gardeners and serious food growers, and it is a $24.95 paperback that publishes in February. Most homeowners try hard to stay on a budget, but they also want to improve the quality of their living space. Oh, whoops. I think we skipped a slide there. Plant, Grow, now is the time for trees. Oh, I'm sorry, I got my script mixed up. Trees and forests are the #1 nature-based solution for reversing the negative effects of climate change. If ever there was a time to be planting trees, that time is now. Inspired by a collective sense of urgency, a global movement to plant trees is emerging and gaining momentum. We need to act on a massive scale and plant millions of trees today to have a measurable and lasting impact on billions of lives tomorrow. And now is the time for trees. The experts at the Arbor Day Foundation will inspire readers to do their part by explaining everything needed to plant trees at home or in their community. From advice on choosing the right size and type of tree to tried and true tips for planting success, this book will help readers leave their own legacy of hope. Time to the organization's 150th anniversary, Now is the Time for Trees, celebrates the Arbor Day Foundation's important role in conservation and energizes readers to plant trees as a means of individual climate activism. It is a 1995 paperback that publishes in March. Okay, there we go. Most homeowners try hard to stay on a budget, but they also want to improve the quality of their living space. The Garden Refresh by Kier Homes helps them create a stylish garden without breaking the bank. With hundreds of DIY tips, Instagram-worthy photography, and advice tailored to new gardeners. Readers will find information on hardscaping materials, low investment, high design accents, focal points, compost and homemade fertilizers, growing plants from seed, buying plants with 4-season beauty, landscaping with edibles, companion planting, and much more. Homes also shares pro tips, top 10 lists, step-by-step projects, creative suggestions, easy homemade remedies to common garden problems, and earth-friendly action items. This creative guide offers projects and ideas that allow homeowners to bump up their garden style, resulting in a fresh, modern, budget-friendly outdoor space. The Garden Refresh is a $27.95 paperback that publishes in May. How, when, and where are common questions for every home gardener, no matter their level of experience. How do I prune a lilac? When do I start my tomato seeds? Where should I plant my hydrangea? The month-by-month gardening guide is here to help. In print since 1965, with 1.7 million copies sold, this gardening classic by Franz Boehmig is now, for the first time, made available in English. A compendium of practical advice, the month-by-month gardening guide shares thousands of tasks and chores broken down for every week of the year. It covers every type of plant: vegetables, flowers, trees and shrubs, herbs, and houseplants. Readers will find general growing advice, suggestions for care and maintenance, tips for planting in a variety of areas, both indoor and out, best practices for harvesting, as well as tricks for helping your houseplants thrive. A year-long primer on what to do when, the month-by-month gardening guide is a complete handbook for any home gardener, new or experienced, seeking clear guidance on garden success. And it is a $27.95 paperback that publishes in May. Everyone wants color in their garden, but each gardener's preferred palette is unique. How do you choose the right one for your garden? And how do you find the plants that will help you fulfill your vision? The expert tips and inspiration found in The Gardener's Palette by award-winning garden designer Joe Thompson is a great place to start. This stunning book presents a new way for gardeners to consider color that will be familiar to anyone who's ever painted a room. Using the Royal Horticultural Society's industry-standard color chip system used to describe any flower's color, Thompson has created 100 palettes derived from existing gardens. Readers can easily find a scheme that appeals to them and then make plant choices that allow them to recreate the scheme in their home gardens. The Gardener's Palette helps gardeners choose with confidence colors that have a personal meaning. For instance, Thompson demonstrates how a flower garden of coral, pink, and yellow can evoke an Italian rooftop scene. Also included are sidebars on color history, 10 planting plans that can be recreated at home, hundreds of inspiring photographs, as well as the expert advice obtained from Thompson's 25-year career. The Gardener's Palette, published in partnership with the Royal Horticultural Society, is a lush, photo-rich approach to garden design, and it is a $45 hardcover that publishes in June. Author Jenny Rose Carey proposes a holistic approach to flower gardening with the refreshing twist in The Ultimate Flower Gardener's Guide. Instead of concentrating primarily on color, it brings flower shape and texture to the fore, helping homeowners make plant choices that come together in an aesthetically pleasing way. The featured plants include both perennials and annuals, and all have been chosen for their ease of care, attractiveness to pollinators, and environmental friendliness. Carey isn't just celebrating flowers, she's telling readers how to best combine them in the garden for seasons of spectacular bloom. She categorizes flowers by their form, when they bloom, the length of time they bloom, and the texture of the plant, both in and out of flower. The book explains how to take all of these factors and mix and match to create a garden that is colorful through the seasons. The book wraps up with a section on laying the groundwork, siting, planning, planting, and maintaining flower beds and borders. The Ultimate Flower Gardener's Guide is a complete roadmap to a successful and satisfying flower-focused garden, and it is a $27.95 paperback that publishes in June. What happens inside a seed after it's planted? How are plants structured? How do plants reproduce? The answer to these and other questions about complex plant processes can be found in the best-selling Botany for Gardeners. First published in 1990 with more than 260,000 copies sold, it has become the go-to introduction to botany for students and gardeners. Now in its fourth edition, Botany for Gardeners has been expanded and updated. It features a revised interior with new photos and illustrations that clarify the concepts, and additional updates that address scientific advances as well as changes in nomenclature and taxonomy. As before, Botany for Gardeners shares accessible information about how plants are organized, how they have adapted to nearly all environments on Earth, their essential functions, and how they reproduce. This best-selling primer on the science of plants will continue to be the go-to book for horticultural students, dedicated home gardeners, master gardeners, and anyone who wants to understand the mysteries of the plant world. It is a $21.95 paperback that publishes in July. All right, so cities are full of life and wild food. A walk through the park could reveal apples, ginkgo, and goldenrod. A stroll down the sidewalk could uncover dandelions, lamb's quarters, and lilac. You just need to know what to look for. In Urban Foraging, Lisa M. Rose explains how to find, identify, harvest, and cook with 50 common wild plants such as chickweed, echinacea, goldenrod, honeysuckle, red clover, and pine. Plant profiles include all the basics necessary for a successful forage. Clear photos of the plant before and after harvest, tips for ethical and safe gathering, and details on culinary uses. Simple recipes for each plant will help readers cook with their harvest. For mulberry, there's a pie recipe. Nettles, a delicious risotto. This stylish guide to wild crafting will appeal to nature lovers, foodies, and anyone looking for a new way to explore the nature in their city. Urban Foraging is a 1995 hardcover that publishes in August. Okay, well, that was a lot. Thanks again for joining us. I've included here my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime. And also links to our NetGalley page and Edelweiss. And just a reminder that we will be at the PLL conference in March here in Portland, and it's booth 1956. So please drop by and say hello. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next, we will hear from Christopher Johns. Christopher has been with Tuttle Publishing for 17 years and is currently their sales and marketing director. Though Origami challenged himself, he enjoys the simplicity and beauty of the art of folded paper. Take it away, Christopher.
So hi everybody, sorry about that little glitch right there. I am Christopher Johns, I'm the sales and marketing director, as they mentioned before, and Tuttle has been publishing craft books since 1948 when we were founded in both Rutland, Vermont, and in Japan. And our specialty has always been Asian related things, be it Japanese when we started off, and then we have expanded it to all Asian countries, all in English. But we've been publishing crafts since the beginning, doing origami at the very start, and some sumie books. But in the last 5 years, we've really expanded it to knitting, crochet, embroidery, quilting, mending. And then about 2 years ago, we even expanded it a little bit more in the arts part, and we went into how to draw manga, which has been incredibly successful, as you can imagine, in the last 2 years, where all of us were stuck at home watching anime and reading books, and that's been very successful for us. So I'm going to show a couple highlights from our previous past. Have done extremely well for us. We have 2 titles that are on the top 10 list for Booklist for this year for top craft and hobbies. I thank you so much, Booklist, for giving a shout out to Korean Patchwork and Mending with Love. That just came out earlier this year. As well as we've gotten some other accolades from other trade magazines like Library Journal and Embroidery Magazine for consumers, sort of showing you the breadth of our list of all needlecraft books that we do. But before I talk about needlecraft, I think this title I really wanted to start with because it really sort of encapsulates the last couple years for us and pretty much life in general. It's really about the craft for our times, for sure, embracing the cracks in all of us and celebrating them. And this is the ancient art of kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing pottery and glass. So you break a mug, you break your favorite mug that you've been drinking coffee for forever, you don't throw it away, you put it together and put gold between it. So this is just really a very well-honored way of repairing. You can not only fix things like mugs and plates and nicks and anything. You put it together with lacquer, you can put it together with gold foil, metallic powders, washi paper, really anything you can to bring back the things that you love and make them more beautiful than they were before. So this is really a wonderful title for our first one in the season. The second title is Creative Mending, which sort of follows up on that same sort of idea. Don't throw it away, don't be Marie Kondo and get rid of all your stuff. Take those things that you love, those socks, those scarves, those jeans, and not only fix them by putting patches on them, but accenting them with the materials. So the hook of this book, when we've done a few mending books, and I'm sure you've seen other people doing mending books out there, is that we have a mending guru on our list who is hugely popular in Japan, has 21,000 followers on Facebook. So that's sort of our hook for this book. You can learn how to do everything. And one thing I wanted to point about all our books, hugely illustrated throughout. So it's really visual how to, we don't miss a step for you when you're looking at it. There'll be instructions, of course, but it'll all be in the pictures also. And that sort of goes across our whole line, that we are a very visual how-to publisher in this sense. So you got jeans, socks, sweaters, even couch covers to repair with this idea of creative mending. And this actually goes back to early Edo time in Japan, when people were doing things called sashiko and repairing their garments. And so this is very much an ancient Japanese technique that has sort of become more popular as we look at our landfills right now. 10% of our landfill is clothing right now. So this is a way to not throw that in the landfill and keep your lovely clothes that you've had, with a little bit of Zen philosophy in there also too. Macrame made easy. Not to date myself, I thought macrame was over in the 70s when I was growing up, but it's back. Maybe not Lazy Susans and smorgasbords, but definitely macrame, especially for millennials. Not necessarily always going to be, you know, shirts and sweaters and blankets, but a lot of accents as well. So you'll learn how to do 28 knots, 32 different knotting patterns, 23 projects at every level, from stylish bracelets to chic handbags and small tapestries. The author has worked in her native Japan for many years in the craft style crafts. Like I said before about our visualness of all our books, this one has 550 detailed photographs and diagrams, so you know how to create pieces with various kinds of cords. Then into our sort of our mainstay in our craft line, which is our crochet titles, which we'll have 3 of them. Crochet is really coming into its own in the last 5 years. I hear from the craft chains and other people saying that crochet is outselling knitting. I'm not sure what the percentage is, but by a lot. People are really interested in it. And the Japanese have been doing it for a long time. And this book is about amigurumi, which is the Japanese technique of doing crochet, mainly about cute little critters that you will make. So like you can see on the cover here, it has 1,500 color photos, so it's chock full of information. This is really the Bible on amigurumi, with 60 instruction diagrams, step-by-step instructions, and 100 stitches that you'll learn to use. There's even a part in here explaining how to knit or crochet for a left-hander, which left-handers get left out a lot of the time. And so this one really will pick up on that. So this is really the reference book on crochet. And there's a lot of other beautiful books out there, but this is really something that will become dog-eared on shelves for people using it over and over and over and over again and going back to it when they can. Next one is a more juvenile title, Crochet Cute Dolls with Mix and Match Outfits. This author is a prolific author on this subject matter. When she became pregnant in 2001, really started her love of crochet. And this book is basically showing you 2 dolls that you learn how to make, Emily and Mako, their teddy bear, and then 63 miniature wardrobe additions that you can add to their wardrobe. It provides a guide, but readers can customize their dolls' features, skin colors, and outfits. I.e. all the dolls don't have to be white. You can have many different colors and shapes to all your dolls, so which is great. So this is very much a fun new idea for us for sort of dressing up your dolls crochet style. And then for the more advanced is our modern Japanese crochet classic stitches made easy. This is from Nihon Vogue, and they are the big craft publisher of Japan. They have been around since the 50s, doing conventions, writing publications, magazines, and we basically translate these books into English for the first time. Actually, her name's not on the cover, but it is translated by Gail Rohn, who is sort of our secret sauce to a lot of our knitting and crochet books. She speaks Japanese, she translates the words, but she also translates the patterns, because the patterns are not necessarily the way we follow the same patterns here in the Western world. So she's not only translating both the language, but the patterns, and she teaches knitting Japanese style around the US in knitting groups all the time and crochet groups. So this is on the heels of our Japanese Wonder of Crochet that sold 10,000 copies on Bookscan since 2019. You'll learn 15 stitches, 7 lessons, and 25 projects. And then you'll get the small goods in this book are a perfect way to experience crocheters to learn Japanese style diagrams at work. This is sort of advanced beginner to an intermediate. And a new thing for us, loom weaving, our first foray into this craft. It's a step-by-step introductory to the book with simple projects for the beginner. It's an accessible, relatively inexpensive loom thing to do that you can find on Etsy, specialty websites, and comprehensive art supply stores. You'll learn 23 hands-on projects, 200 photographs, diagrams, and schematics. You'll learn to do plant covers, little purses, little fringe scarves, small wall hangings, multi-purpose mats, and whimsical to classical in style. Now I'm going to pivot to what I was mentioning before, that we've really come into our own in the art instruction part of our craft line, and we're doing a lot of manga how-to books right now. If you're looking at any publishing trends that are going on right now, the actual manga novels, graphic novels are probably one of the highest things that are going on in book publishing right now. I think a lot of it has to do that we're all stuck at home in the last 2 years, and the younger people have been watching a lot of anime and been inspired by it. And so because the anime and the graphic novel are how-to graphic novel, how-to manga books have become doing extremely well. This is Manga Chibi girls. As you can tell by the picture, they all have really big heads and big eyes and small bodies. This is a wacky Japanese aesthetic, and they have male and female versions, but this one, of course, just focuses on a female, doing different kinds of poses. You learn how to do head to body ratios, dramatic emotions and poses. And then you also have sort of a hands-on photo illustrated spreads to sort of track the author as they go through all the different steps. As you can see by the cover here, 1,000 illustrations, which is one of the two sort of attributes to our whole manga line, where other publishers have maybe under 500 illustrations. Ours are always going to be 750 to 1,500 illustrations, where other competition out there are from Westerners talking about manga. Ours are all by Japanese practicing manga artists out there. So this is going to be great. Two great manga artists doing their best. Next one is really what a lot of people like to do in manga, which is fighting characters. And this is, the author is the perfect author for this, has a huge background in martial arts and loves action films. And so this is a very much every aspect of fighting imaginable, male and female, with a lot of 3D kicks and punches all the way through. What's great about this, it's for both kinds of artists, one being the traditional hand-drawn artist, and then the second one, the person who's doing it on screen. So it plays to both kinds of artists. This is a little bit older in level, as we say 14 and up, because there's a little bit of, vaguely scantily clad people in it. And then a classic book for us, for the beginner, as it says in the title, Drawing Amazing Manga Characters, a drawing exercise book for beginners. So this is really for anybody starting off in this world, 850 illustrations throughout. I think there's 3 different authors in this one. There's a lot of closer looks in here where you go in depth on one aspect of it. At the end of every chapter, there's an interview by a manga artist. And then there's also a YouTube tutorial that you can go online and watch even more, watching these artists in action. So that's really wonderful. And here's some more of the 81 lessons that you'll learn in all their complexity. Like I said, we don't skimp. We show you every little step that these characters need to do. So it's not like you see 1, 2, and then it's done. You're like, what happened to 4, 5, and 6? We give you all the major steps so you can see everything that you need to do very easily. So the next title is a little departure for us from the manga world, which is Sketch Your World, a guide to sketch journaling with over 500 illustrations. This is basically a doodle book for an older, sort of more urban doodle crowd. I think I just made that up. And it's for people who can go on vacation or who are having staycations and basically sitting there in their backyard or their favorite cafe or bar and sketching all the funny people, wonderful people that they see in their day. There's 40 step-by-step lessons showing you how to draw everything from a meal you ordered at a cafe to a map highlighting your latest trip. So you also get vegetables, bottles, cups, clothing, signs, maps, floor plans. So these books do incredibly well for us. This is not a book that you write in at all. It's just to give you the idea of how to sketch. So it is something that can inspire people to get their own journals out and take it with you. It is a smaller format also, so it could drop into your bag as you go out and sketch different things in your world. And then this is brand new for us. We've never done a painting book before, but super excited about this. Modern Japanese Painting Techniques, a step-by-step beginner's guide with over 21 lessons and 300 illustrations. So like I said, 21 paintings. There's 7 noted modern Japanese artists profiled in here. And this is a special kind of painting that is not necessarily Western. It's a very flat but very colorful, sparse way of painting. Which is very Japanese. So you don't put a lot of stuff in it. It's kind of like the Zen aesthetics. You don't crowd the image. You focus in on the subject and maybe a good background color to it. So it's a really powerful, interesting idea. There's nothing else on this kind of technique out there that I can tell. So really, I think it's going to be a new kind of painting book that no one's seen before. The author himself has been painting teaching for over 40 years. He actually has his own art school in Japan. So really a very well experienced and professional author to have on our list. And as I mentioned before, we started off doing our crafts back in 1948. We continue to do it. I don't have it in these slides, but we do every kind of origami. We have kits, we have paper packs, we have a giant bank list of about 150 to 200 titles in origami. And I'm just showing you 2 highlights, two of the sort of wow titles for us. This one is the complete book of Origami Polyhedra by Tomoko Fusei, who is considered the queen of modular origami and probably one of the 3 top folders in the world. Origami has had a huge rebirth in the last 5 or 10 years, very mathematically driven. I think schools use it in their classes as sort of a STEM kind of idea, and this book is perfect for this. So polyhedra is basically geometric forms. The pieces of paper themselves are not very big. There's not a lot of folding. It's really the intricacy of putting these all together into this ball or different geometric forms that stays together without tape, without glue, without staples, just by friction alone. So they're incredible. It's not for the beginner, as you can imagine. I would love to make one of these, but that's never going to happen. I pretty much stop at the crane. But anyway, this is going to be a gorgeous book, very well known. She's actually going to be coming to America in 2023 to do an exhibit at the Asian Art Museum, which we're very excited about because she's really one of the big names out there. There was a Nova special a few years back called it was called The Origami Revolution. You can still see it online, and she is the first 10 minutes of that documentary. So she really knows her stuff. So it's really an amazing book. Nothing else like that for one of the pioneers in origami. Then on sort of the fun side of things, modern origami, the amazing art of paper sculptures. This comes from a very established origami artist himself. His background is actually in origami robots of all funny things, but this one is sort of a more quirky one for us, where you learn how to fold 6 mid-century modern chairs. You learn how to do 20 different realistic animals, including a bird in a birdhouse, a long-necked alpaca, an Asian elephant, and even some weird, fun pages to make and things like that. So really a fun, intermediate, and advanced beginner book for our list. But like I said, that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to origami, which leads me to my last slide, which is basically saying, keep in touch with us, but definitely go to Tuttle's homepage on Edelweiss. You'll see the whole Edelweiss collection that I presented to you today. And at the very back of it, you'll see all of our origami in there as well, and other craft titles for the last couple years. We do give out, e-galleys all the time. So if you want to see some of our knitting books, please do look at them and request review copies, and we'd love to share them with you. So thanks for supporting Tuttle and our great craft line, and I'll give it now back to the next person.
Thank you, Christopher. Our next presenter will be Anne Woodcock. Anne joined Search Press North America in 2016 as Director of Marketing and Publicity. She enjoys knitting, needlepoint, cross-stitch, and embroidery, and has been known to do needle felting and even decoupage. Before diving into art and craft publishing, she worked for many years in medical publishing for Elsevier and Williams and Wilkins, Walters, Kluwer, in a variety of roles, including Publishing Director, VP of Content Management, and Sales and Marketing Director. She lives outside of Philadelphia with her husband and her daughter, Ivy. Thank you for joining us, Anne. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. And a quick shout out to my local library, which is the Tredyffrin Public Library. We're outside of Philadelphia, and our library is the Tredyffrin Public Library, part of the Tredyffrin East Town, Chester County system. Thanks so much. Just wanted to give you a quick update on some of our best-selling titles for libraries. I'm sure many of you are familiar with these. These are all the best-selling titles that came out in 2021, and just one title from the very end of 2020. And these are all titles that do incredibly well for libraries. So hopefully you'll be familiar with them. Among this list are 3 or 4 titles that have Booklist stars, including Modern Mending, which is an absolutely terrific book of a new and very fresh modern take on how to mend almost anything, really creative and ingenious ways to look at and mending being a way to save clothes and create new things too. Making felt hats, which is a great craft, super one for doing projects if your library is looking for projects to do. Color Demystified, which is all about color combinations and color mixing, perfect for artists of all levels. And our first Booklist star from the year is Mini Amigurumi Animals, which is frankly the most adorable book you'll see. If you haven't yet taken a look at this, please do so. If you'd like to see a DRC, we're happy to do that for you. This book has done incredibly well through all channels, but has been particularly sound seller for libraries, and is one I think that many people of all crochet skill levels can enjoy. They're small projects, but really, really fun to do and fun to make, great for using your stash of craft items that you might have. So these are the top ones, and wanted to just give you some areas to focus on when you're looking at your collections. And we'll take a look at knitting and crochet first, which we know from feedback from you is probably one of your biggest areas when you're looking for programs. So our 3 big titles here are How to Knit Block by Block Crochet and Mini Amigurumi Animals. But coming up, we have some terrific books to add to this collection, including the Very Easy Guide to Cable Knitting and the Very Easy Guide to Lace Knitting. If you're familiar with those in previous iterations, they're now being published by Search Press. We also have an Amigurumi Farmyard, which will add to your amigurumi collection of terrific items to crochet. You can even crochet a wheelbarrow and a fence and a barn to go with it. And of course, we're also reissuing the 100 Flowers to Knit and Crochet. This is the first time Search Press in the United States has had it. It's been published by Search Press for many years in the UK. You'll also see that we have terrific things like knitted socks from Finland and Bonnie the Cow and Friends. These are, Bonnie the Cow is their larger animals to make for crochet. Really fun characters that can be done with with quite thick yarn or quite thin yarn, creating different sizes too. And of course, the block collection, which is perfect for knitting and crochet ideas and inspiration. We've talked a little bit today on things to do to have eco crafts and recycling, and I just wanted to highlight some of our titles that we have in this very, very popular area and very popular for librarians. Modern Mending is the title I mentioned. This is a great way to customize old clothes, but also other items that you have around the house. A fresh release that's just come out and has really shot up the charts is the Eco Christmas Craft Book, perfect for this is mostly paper craft and using craft items around the house to create really beautiful holiday designs. And from Debbie Shore, we have 2 books, So Eco-Friendly. These are items that are designed to replace things that you would normally purchase. So she has a waxed wrap. She has tote bags, and other items such as that. You'll see a loofah that you can make yourself. And coming next year, refashion, restyle, and restitch. And this is taking items that are used for one purpose and completely refashioning them. So the things that you see in the cover were actually shirts and I think a pair of trousers. And she's remade them into cushion covers and into curtains, all kinds of great ideas. But Debbie Shore is actually the original recycler and eco-crafter with her half-yard books that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. The half-yard books take a half yard of fabric or less and fashion them into really creative designs. The thing that Debbie Shore is known for is her design and her flair for combining fabrics of all types and sizes. You probably know her half-yard bags and purses, which is one of our best-selling titles. We've recently reorganized this collection into a seasonal collection. There are several half-yard books. We have the half-yard summer collection and half-yard spring collection. And these are all designed for seasonal favorites that you can have to use your recycled items or half yards of fabric or less. Perfect for if you just think you could make something out of, retain a bit of fabric to use and make something from. The half-yard books are perfect for this. Also, in sewing and quilting in general, we have a terrific line also. Heading up in particular are the reissue and revamp and completely refreshed complete book of patchwork quilting and applique. This book by Linda Seward is considered to be one of the classic books on the subject and is perfect for libraries. It includes lots of inspiration, lots of ideas of how to create patchwork and quilting programs to put together. Of course, if you have some fans of people who want to sew for dolls, the Barbie Boutique and its sister book, Sewing for Barbie, are also books that we've partnered with the maker. It's a French designer, and these books all work with all different sizes of Barbie. On the quilting area, we have Quilt As You Go and Big Stitch Quilting, which came out earlier this year. These are books designed by Carolyn Forster, who is one of our leading quilters. She presents regularly at the quilt shows in the US as well as internationally. Those of you may be familiar with Daydream Journals, with Stitched Memories by Tilly Rose. This is her follow-up book, Daydream Journals, coming out, which we expect to be perfect for those people who are interested in creating beautiful journals, adding clever design ideas to their journals, really hitting the nice idea of taking fabrics, embellishing them with both sewn items and embellished items and embroidered items. Wanted to also tell you, just remind you that we are known as the embroidery publisher. Embroidery is a leading area for Search Press. We publish more in embroidery than really almost anyone else. And our books are considered to be the best by many people, mostly by every embroiderer who's around the world. We partner with the Embroiderers Guild in the UK, and we also publish the books for the Royal School of Needlework worldwide. I wanted to highlight a couple of titles for you here. The RSN, we have the Essential Stitch Guides, which came out that in a smaller format, and we've reformatted these books to be a larger size and a bit easier to use and to work with. I think they're really nice, and you'll find that they're much easier to circulate when held in your collection. I also wanted to highlight the Trace, the embroidered art of Michelle Carrer. She is the person who designed the costumes and did the embroidery for Game of Thrones and also for The Crown and a couple of other. She's a really phenomenal costume designer and embroiderer, and her work is really stunning. And wanted to also share with you a nice little note from Mary Corbett, who is the real opinion leader on embroidery, who loved this book, Needle Painted Plants and Pollinators, that just came out last week, which is already flying off the shelves, but could be a great one for you to have on hand. Lots of great and fun projects to work on there. In our art collections, we have Manga Art Secrets, which is a terrific book doing extremely well. The author of Manga Art Secrets, Dalia Sharwama, has over 180,000 followers on Instagram and is a well-known thought leader in the way that manga art is created. And next year we are coming out with 2 new books in our How to Draw series. And these are collections called Draw 100, Flowers and also Animals. I'm also wanted to mention to you too, these are beginning art books, really designed for people who are starting and may want to have get some ideas of how to get going. System 3 is a type, painting with System 3. This book is for System 3, which is a type of paint that is considered, it's used really mostly for people who are beginning artists, and is available in almost every store. Very, very widely circulated paint, not considered a kind of high level paint at all. Also coming in 2022 is a great list of titles in more intermediate art instruction. And these are books that are great for a library because they are something that someone could check out for inspiration and just to get some great ideas. In particular, the plein air painting with oils, I think will be really a great one for your collections. Plein air painting is big everywhere across America and Canada. There are thousands of societies of plein air. I also wanted to just briefly mention to you our general craft collection and highlight one of our leading titles, which is Needle Felting for Beginners, that came out last year and came out this last year and has been a phenomenal selling book, great for your collection. I will quickly show you the 2 collection foundations that we have. So we've put together some basic lists for you that if you're going to start a craft collection or you want some help on what you need, Search Press has some great ideas for you. So first we have a collection foundation in some of the more soft crafts. And these are all books that are our best-selling list of titles across the board. But in particular, they're really bestsellers for libraries. Almost everyone in the world has seen a copy of the A to Z of Embroidery Stitches. If you don't have this in your collection, I would strongly recommend that you purchase it. It is an absolutely superb book, as is every other book on this list. We have a list, the list we provided for the webinar has all of the titles, all the ISBNs, and we also have a full Edelweiss collection put together. So if you have any questions about this, you can let us know. Also wanted to give you a core foundation list, a collection foundation in art. And so these are some of our leading titles in art. We have a whole series called Absolute Beginner, and these books are really designed for just that, the absolute beginner. Our number one best-selling book overall across all of our titles is How to Draw Animals in Simple Steps. This is a terrific book, big size, over 100 pages, and really good value for money at just under $20. Also on our website, you can find our front list and back list catalogs, as well as through Penguin Random House, you will find our Search Press Spring 2022 catalog on Edelweiss. Thank you so much for your time. And my contact details are here, and I'd love to hear from you if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Anne. And now we're going to hear a special presentation from our librarian guest, Nanette Donohue. Nanette is the Collections and Technical Services Manager at the Champaign Public Library in Champaign, Illinois. A dream job for a person who loves books more than just about anything in the world. She is the current chair of the ALA RUSA Codes Listen List, and she served on the RUSA Codes Reading List Council from 2014 to 2019. Thank you so much for joining us, Nanette.
Nanette, you are muted. Could you please unmute?
Sorry about that. Okay. I want to remind everybody, first of all, that crafts are a huge community builder. We are in a time right now where folks are desperately in need of community. And crafts have a history of being community builders. Think about ladies in waiting sitting in the Queen's chambers embroidering, or a 19th century quilting bee, or even a contemporary knitting group meeting at a coffee shop. So I encourage you, as you think about craft books, to partner with local organizations and your local craft businesses for programming and collection suggestions. Reach out and let these groups know that you're interested in their feedback about your collection, you're interested in their suggestions, you'd like to work with them perhaps for programming or to give them a space to meet. These kind of partnerships can really help position the library as a community hub and as a great place for people to gather. So when we think about craft books, we think about where they might be located in the library. So usually there's 2 spots in the Dewey area that will be located. Sewing books are usually in 646-1 to 646-5, and that's where you'll find all your sewing content, from fashion sewing to accessories to sewing pretty little dresses for babies. Most other crafts are going to pop up in 745, 746. And I don't know about your library, but in my library, that is one of the most popular areas of our nonfiction collection. It's a very high turnover area. People use these books a lot. Now, some crafts may pop up in other spots. Jewelry making sometimes shows up in the 739s under art metalwork. You may choose to co-locate those to keep them with the rest of the jewelry making instead. I'm going to talk about 2 kinds of craft books today. The first kind is references, and these are really the core of your craft collection. References are focused on information rather than projects. That's not to say that a reference can't have some projects in it, but for the most part, they are focused on information. They can be general or specific. Now, your general reference would be something like the Vogue knitting book that's on this slide. It's a comprehensive overview of a craft from a basic beginner level to a confident advanced level. So something like the Vogue knitting book is going to have everything from, this is a knitting needle, this is what it looks like, this is how they are sized, these are the types of knitting needles, to this is how you capture your floats on the back of your stranded color project. So it's going to answer a wide variety of questions for a wide variety of knitters. Specific references would be focused on a particular technique or skill. So something like a color work reference or a lace knitting reference, a guide to a particular type of embroidery like we saw in the Search Press presentation. Now, my personal most used knitting reference is Cast On Bind Off. I refer to this all the time and is one of my very favorites. This will also be the place where you would classify, say, a knitting stitch dictionary, or an embroidery stitch dictionary, or a quilt block guide. This reference category to me also includes beginner's guides, so things that will get somebody started in a particular craft, that will walk them through the process of choosing supplies and choosing materials and making those first projects. Speaking of projects, the other type of book is the project guide. This is the I know how to do this, now what do I make category. These can focus on a type of project. So on this slide, I've got a picture of a book about socks, knitting small gifts, knitting dressed up bears. They can also focus on a technique. So I've got a stranded color work and a brioche knitting book here too. Now, the project-based stuff is usually going to include maybe some basic level information, usually in an appendix. The assumption there is you know what you're doing, you know how to knit, how to purl, how to do the basics. But the technique-focused project guides often contain a detailed exploration of the technique used in the projects. And that brioche knitting book, for example, contains descriptions of how to do single color, double color, how to do increases and decreases in brioche, and then a bunch of different projects as well. Magazines are still thriving in the craft arena, and they are a budget-friendly way to provide access to project-based content. What I personally like about magazines is that they give you inexpensive access to projects in a variety of styles for a variety of skill levels. So if you look, for example, at that woodworking magazine, you're going to find some really basic level projects for people who are new to woodworking, maybe don't have a full suite of tools and supplies. And you're also going to find some more advanced level projects for folks who really know what they're doing, they have all the tools that they need, and they want to challenge themselves. The other thing I like about magazines is that the shorter turnaround time as far as their publishing schedule can mean that they are more in line with current trends. So they're really a little bit more of the moment sometimes than some of the books that are out there. A lot of crafters are getting their information through free online resources. There is a ton of it available online. Most crafters would point to YouTube as a great source for tutorials and inspiration. And chances are, if you're browsing YouTube for instructions on a particular technique, you're going to be able to find somebody whose style resonates with you and makes sense to you. Online magazines are also a great place to go. Knitty Magazine, for example, has been publishing online for over 20 years. Their whole archive is free and available for anyone to look at. It's got patterns, it's got articles about knitting techniques. It's got plenty of content about spinning. Scrapbooking Cards Today is a print magazine that publishes all of their issues for free online. You don't even have to sign up for anything, which is pretty impressive. Craft stores and manufacturer and designer websites often feature free patterns and tutorials. And yeah, they're trying to sell you something, but most crafters know that you don't have to use the exact materials that are being called for in a pattern, that you can substitute things pretty easily. So if you don't mind a little bit of advertorial, that can be a really nice source, especially for patterns and tutorials. And the other thing to remember is that craft blogs are still around, and so are their archives. They aren't quite the force that they were 10 years ago, but there's still craft bloggers, and a lot of the bloggers have their archives online. So that's a pretty rich source of information and tutorials and projects. There are 2 subscription-based online resources that are available for libraries in the craft arena. About a month and a half ago, Overdrive launched the library version of Craftsy through their Libby app. It's a pay-per-use product. Craftsy is a pretty big name in the craft education field. They've been around a long time. I've had a personal subscription for quite a while. And they have some really extensive, well-filmed classes that teach people techniques on all kinds of crafts. They've got some culinary stuff. They've got some fine arts. So it's a pretty wide-ranging library of materials. And it is pay-per-use, so you only pay for what your patrons check out. Creative Bug has more of a traditional database licensing plan. You pay for an all-access pass for a flat fee based on, I think, population. And their stuff is a lot of project-based classes, so they're a little bit shorter than the Craftsy classes, and they're very focused on coming up with finishing a project. They do a lot of quilting and sewing. There's a bit of knitting in there. And this screenshot shows that they even have a class on how to choose a houseplant, which I think is pretty cool. Now, we can't talk about managing collections without talking about weeding. It's a crucial component of collection management in any collection, regardless of the topic. And your craft collections are absolutely no exception to this. You do need to weed items that are worn and damaged, and you may need to replace. Now, some craft books are published and they have the wire binding, and they can get a little floppy, they can tear. Sometimes you'll have a sewing book that has patterns enclosed that the patterns may be missing, and therefore the book is not useful anymore. So you'll need to weed those sorts of items out of your collection and possibly replace them. I encourage you to look both at items that are not circulating and at items that are circulating. You look at items that are not circulating to figure out what you need less of and what you can let go of. And you look at items that are circulating to figure out what your community is looking for in your craft collection. So if you notice that there is a particular craft that is especially popular and it's kind of unexpected to you, then you know that it's time to purchase more in that area. I also encourage you to let go of items that are hopelessly dated. I know that there are always those people who say, but it's going to come back in style. Stuff always comes back in style. If it's going to come back in style, someone will publish an updated book about it. And I made a joke here about ugly 1980s sweaters coming back into style. I lived through the initial iteration of ugly 80s sweaters. I do not think they are back in style, but somebody has published an updated book about them. This came out within the last year, and that kind of kills me. But just looking at the books that books and pictures that I've highlighted here, that America's Knitting book there on the slide, I'm sure it has great information that is still useful and relevant. I mean, the way you make a knit stitch or make a purl stitch has not changed in 40 years, 50 years. But looking at that book, it looks like it smells like grandma's basement. All that acrylic yarn, it looks like the stuff you inherited when your great aunt that you've never met died. So we've got to keep these things up to date. Same with something like the machine knitting book. Machine knitting still exists, but machine knitting technology has certainly changed since 1987 or whenever this book came out. So you want to keep these things up to date. And crafters are pretty savvy about trends and about style. There are some things that are timeless. References don't always go out of style, but you do want to have something with updated information, updated pictures, etc. So in terms of figuring out what's next, how do you figure out what your customers are going to want? My philosophy of being a collection manager is that I'm trying to figure out what people want before they know they want it. So trend spotting is a thing for me. There are two places to go for some craft industry trend spotting. Pinterest Predicts is through Pinterest, which is very popular with a lot of crafters. And what they do is they analyze the data that they're getting as far as what people are searching on Pinterest, what people are pinning, and they make predictions based on what they see as being up and coming. They are due to release their predictions for next year within the next couple of weeks. And they have a pretty good track record of predicting what's next. Their track record's about 80% every year, which is kind of impressive. And then the Craft Industry Alliance is a trade organization for folks who are working in the craft industry. So, you know, fabric manufacturers and yarn dyers and pattern designers and pretty much anybody who works in the craft industry. And every year in January, they put together a list of what they see as being the craft industry's trends for the following year. And they also have a pretty good track record of figuring out what's next and what's going to be hot with crafters. So I'm going to wrap this up. Here's my contact information if you want to talk collections, if you want to talk craft books, if you want to talk knitting, sewing, quilting, crochet, whatever. I've got my email address, my Twitter, and if you want to check out what I'm knitting, there is my Ravelry link. And that's all I have for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nanette, and a big thank you to all of today's wonderful panelists. Tomorrow, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's title list, PowerPoint slides, video recording, and certificate of completion. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones like the ones you see here. Not yet a subscriber? Pair the page-by-page reading experience of print with the convenience of online access at booklistonline.com and lock in print, online, digital, and archive access by taking advantage of the special webinar offer to get Booklist for only $75. Patron-friendly, librarian-approved, and free with a Booklist subscription, Booklist Reader, Booklist's new digital-only magazine highlighting diverse readers' advisory recommendations for all ages, has arrived. To see and share the latest issue, which is currently freely available to all, visit booklistonline.com/reader-issues. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. One more huge thank you to our panelists and to our sponsors, Timber Press, Tuttle Publishing, and Search Press. And this concludes today's webinar.